Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to session 2 of the 2021 Dynamic Spectrum Alliance Global Summit, continuing on our theme of a new spectrum mindset. On behalf of the Alliance and its members, I want to welcome you and thank you for making time to participate in this virtual summit. As noted earlier today, this has been the second virtual summit that Alliance has hosted, which speaks both to the challenges that the pandemic has put in front of all of us and the resilience, I would say, the global community has demonstrated throughout the pandemic, as enabled by the very technologies that we will be talking about at length at this summit. So welcome and thank you. My name is Jeffrey Yan. I'm Director of Technology Policy with Microsoft. I've had the pleasure and privilege to be one of the small group of people who started the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance some years ago, and we're just recalling that this is by now the ninth global summit of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. So it's been a long way coming, and thank you for all your support. So for all those of you who were able to tune in to the morning opening session of the summit earlier this morning, I hope you've enjoyed the excellent presentations and the lively discussions that we've had. For those of you who missed it, recordings are available after the summit. And so as a note, logistic that this session will also be recorded for DSA's use and distribution. The slides will be posted at the Alliance's website following the event. You are encouraged to ask questions. You can post questions in the question window as each speaker presents, and we'll try our best to address those questions as they come and by each of the speakers. Before we start today's session 2, I would like to call upon Dr. Martha Suarez, the president of Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, to say a few words and also to provide a quick recap of the sessions this morning, America's time, as session 1, to provide you with a context. So without further ado, Martha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure for the DSA to have this first session in the time zone of Asia Pacific region, and we are very excited about this panel that you are going to attend today and the keynote presentations after. We really appreciate all the collaboration and the interest that we are seeing from different stakeholders in terms of unlicensed access and spectrum sharing. And we think that those are key elements and modes of access that really enable more broadband access and better connectivity worldwide. So about this morning, we had a great presentation as we had 3 keynote speakers in the first session. First, Mr. Mario Maniewicz from ITUR. He opened the summit and provided some important remarks about, I think the main message from it was like, what can we do for spectrum and how can we make sure that we really create the right conditions for new technologies, for innovation, and for better connectivity. Then we had also keynote presentations from Mr. Leonardo Euler from Anatel, the chairman. He also gave great insights about some of the main initiatives that Anatel is leading in Brazil. And we also, at the end, had a presentation from Mr. Thomas Everts from Veneza, and he provided an European overview about spectrum sharing and some of the key challenges that we still have to face in terms of having really efficient spectrum sharing with all the stakeholders involved and engaged. And we had also 3 presentations from different industry stakeholders. So we had a Wi-Fi report from Asia. That was one of the release from the DSA this year, deep study about the current traffic in Wi-Fi networks in North America and Europe with real information from the field. And we also had a presentation from IDC from Mr. Mark Walker, and he was referring to Access as a foundation for digital transformation. So he provided an overview about emerging markets, some of the key elements for digital transformation, and at the end also a recap on how new enabling technologies like 5G and Wi-Fi 6E can contribute to that transformation. And we closed this morning session with a great market overview. We had a presentation from Chris Szymanski from Broadcom about the market readiness in terms of equipment and ecosystem and all the pieces for having a wider adoption of Wi-Fi 6E globally. So he had some demos and some videos about different vendors that have already launched commercial equipment for the 6 gigahertz band. So that was the recap, and I'm sure that you will all enjoy this session, and I invite you to see also once they will be online if you were not able to attend this morning. I think you're
someone had to do that. Thank you, Martha. I just saying that was a wonderful recap of the great presentations and discussion this morning. I highly recommend those of you who were not able to tune in to view the recording later. And specifically, I want to call out Chris Szymanski's garage. That was quite a garage. So for sake of that, you should check out a video, and there's also demos. So Chris, I'll call you for the garage advice later. So without further ado, let's launch into today's session 2, which will start with a session. We should go to next, on regulatory updates on 6 gigahertz. As those of you heard from the morning session, that is the topic, the hot topic of the day, if not for the many months so far. And leading this discussion is Mary Braun from Cisco. I'll just do a quick introduction of Mary and then for her to introduce her panel. So Mary is an industry veteran, and many of you know her very well. You have her bios right here. I wouldn't, read everything, but just to highlight that Mary has been on both the supply side, the demand side, the regulatory side of the industry for many years. So she's so well-rounded and is best positioned in moderating this session of a very, very important and very current topic of 6 gigahertz access. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It is such a pleasure to be here, and welcome to everybody, whether it's morning, evening, or the middle of the night where you are. This is a terrific topic. As Jeffrey says, the 6 gigahertz topic is the hottest topic in the globe on spectrum policy right now. And we have got a terrific lineup of panelists for you to talk about this issue. They collectively have over 70 years of experience in spectrum policy. We have 2 engineers, we have a lawyer, we have a political scientist, and so they're going to bring their unique perspectives, but also their experiences, because all of them have been involved in considering the 6 gigahertz band recently, and in decisions that allow unlicensed or license exempt uses of that band to one degree or another. So I'm really looking forward to learning from them and hearing about their decisions. What I'm going to do is we are going to just start by introducing one panelist. We're going to let them have a few minutes to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And we'll go through the panel in that way, and then we'll start with questions. And so I have some questions prepared, and I hope that you listening think about questions as you hear the panelists talk. We'll make this a lively session, particularly for our panelists for whom it is the middle of the night. We need to keep them energized and engaged in the conversation. So first, we are going to start with Dr. Agustín Linares, who is the manager for Spectrum, Orbit, and Broadcasting in Brazil for Anatel. And I would say for anybody in the Americas, Agostinho needs no introduction. He has been a stalwart in CTEL and in the ITU activity. He is an engineer by training and of course was instrumental in Brazil's recent decision to open up the full 6 gigahertz band to what they call in Latin America free use spectrum. So Agostinho, let me turn the mic over to you, and if you could say some words of introduction or whatever you like, take 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mary, for the introduction. Greetings for everyone. First of all, I would like to thank DSA for the organization of the event and for the invitation. The next World Radio Conference will be in 2023, but Anatel took one of the most important decisions on spectrum management this year. With the approval of the whole 1200 megahertz in 6 gigahertz band for wireless access systems, including radio LAN, we are prepared for the next 15-20 years of the full spectrum availability for Wi-Fi 6E and the evolutions. Being able to take advantage of the whole economic and society benefits of the technology. This decision was not easy, but was based on a long debate with all stakeholders. In February of this year, Anatel approved the use of 5925 to 7125 megahertz for low power indoor and very low power applications. We have a clear indication that in the future we will have standard power with automatic flex coordinator and NRU application also using this band. Regarding compatibility between Wi-Fi 6E and intelligent transport systems, we established an out-of-band emission limits of -27 dBm per megahertz, which we believe guarantee the protection of ITS. But Anatel's board requested further studies and seek international harmonization in our region about this issue. Therefore, in a couple of months, we will conclude this new report and maybe review the out-of-band emissions limits in Brazil to protect ITS. Brazil also presented in the last PCC2 meeting of CTEL a draft proposal in order to have a regional recommendation on the use of the whole 6 gigahertz band for wireless access system. We expect that this proposal be approved in the next PCC2 meeting, but we need to wait if our proposal will be some amendments in the core of the text. I hope not. For our decision here in Brazil, we also took into account that we have more than 10,000 point-to-point links in this band, including electronic signal gathering systems. And these links are spread not only suburban or faraway regions, but also in urban areas. Usually, when we implement IMT in a band, we need to reform the band, moving the original services to another band. So Wi-Fi 6E will be a very good neighbor. In the future, this band will be used for local point-to-point links and access as well with the automatic flex coordinator. This will be very important for ISP and to improve connectivity in a wide sense. So, in short, I hope that other countries can also make spectrum available for Wi-Fi 6E soon to enjoy all benefits of this technology and its evolutions. Thank you, Mary. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Agostinho. That was a great summary of Brazil's decision and some of the thinking that went into it. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more in depth about some of those topics later on in the Q&A. So next, the next panelist I want to turn to is Tariq Alawadi, who is both the Executive Director of Spectrum Affairs at TRA in the UAE, and also the Chairman of the Arab Spectrum Management Group. Another person who needs no introduction, really, for anybody who's been involved in ITU work. You know Mr. Alawadi, and in fact, he was chair of one of the World Radio Conferences, I think back in 2012. He is credited with modernizing spectrum management policy in the UAE, and he is also an engineer by training. Without further ado, Mr. Alawati, can you speak to us about the UAE's activities on 6 gigahertz?
Well, thank you very much, Mary. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from whoever participating to this event. On behalf of the ASMG and UAE also, that we'd like to thank Dynamic Spectrum Alliance for arranging and conducting this webinar. It's very interesting and exciting. Really, it has very good information about many topics. We wish also them all the luck and to have more and more similar events in future also. With regard to 6 gigahertz, as you mentioned at the beginning of your remarks, that this has become one of the hot topics in the world right now. When we see it in the news every time, when receiving countries who's using the spectrum or assigning this 60 gigahertz, either the whole band or part of the band for Wi-Fi or for mobile. In UAE, what we have done also that I just give you a brief little bit when we started to see this band in 2019 as a new agenda item. At the beginning, as UAE with ASMG also countries, we were supporting to have this 6 gigahertz to be one of the agenda item in WRC, coming WRC 2023. However, after we studied carefully in UAE, we found that it is very heavily used by fixed satellite services and fixed services, and we have some very big major customer who's using this as a fixed links. So it was not an easy decision for us to put it as one of the agenda item in WRC 23. However, we said we'll see the sharing studies how we're conducting, and there will be any feasible sharing studies conducting for that. It will be good. Why not? Because for protecting the incumbent services. However, when we come this year or last year, 2020, we saw it how the war is going on right now with the 6 gigahertz, especially with Wi-Fi E. So, and we saw that it is important as also for UAE to have such technology, because UAE, it has very, maybe later on we can give you more information. It is one of the highest, if not the highest, in terms of index, worldwide index, having highest broadband. And we are having a lot of events and a lot of tourists coming here and different technologies. So we decided to do some consultation with our all partners here in the UAE. I mean, telecom operators, vendors, and all other related partners to see and to see which band to either to use it the whole band or part of the band. At the end, after we carefully studied and we saw that to use the part of the band which is 500 megahertz, 5.9 to 6.4, to be assigned and allocated for Wi-Fi. We decided that this time, and the rest of the band we said that we will see the studies going on and in the ITU for the agenda item 1.2, and we will decide later on for the rest of the band. Either we to be used in Wi-Fi or to be used in for mobile. That will depend later on in the studies. However, this is of course for the UAE. Just to give a brief also that maybe you know that Saudi Arabia already assigned to have it the full band 1200 megahertz for the Wi-Fi. The Qatar also, they have just recently released a consultation. They are intending to go back to use the whole 1200 megahertz. The rest of the Arab countries, some of them they are still not decide anything, but some also they are going to use the 500 megahertz. And of course, this is also will help and support to have good economic scale of the devices and this services in the countries, and to have a good broadband services. For the UAE, we are still working to see it. Maybe by this year we will change their mind or not, but it depends on the responses that we'll get it from our partners on the rest of the band, because we'd like to see the responses first of all on this 500 megahertz, how to be good. If that is fine and we require more spectrum, then we will decide later on. So this is just a brief about the UAE, how they have done it, and some of the Arab countries. And thank you very much, Mary. Coming back to you.
Thank you. And of course, for listeners in the Asia region who may not be familiar with Region 1, in the ITU, Region 1 is looking at a coexistence study from 6425 up, essentially, to the top part of the band, and trying to decide if IMT uses can coexist there. And of course, you reference the fixed services and the fixed satellite services uplink
Exactly.
in the band. So that's a challenging coexistence task, but that is underway,
Yes.
which is going on now. Well, thank you very much. That's great. And I note, I think UAE was the first country in the Gulf that acted on 6 for license exempt. So you started a trend there.
Thank you very much. It is.
Yes. So since we're in the Region 1, I'd like to turn it next to Alexander Kuhn, who is the Deputy Head of International Spectrum Affairs at BNetzA. And he has, for many years, been extremely active in the at least for me as an American, the arcane process of spectrum policy making in Europe, which is involves a lot of collaboration and a lot of meeting and a lot of stakeholders and a lot of process, which he knows intimately well. But that process has been run for the lower 500 megahertz in the band, and I'm hoping, Alexander, you can tell us about that and sort of where we stand now in Europe.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Good morning, everybody from Europe. Good afternoon. I prepared some slides to everybody to have an overview for everybody. Wi-Fi 6E and or wireless LAN 6 gigahertz is definitely one of the hot potatoes now, which we have on our spectrum barbecue all around the world. And it's extremely wonderful that we can speak about it here today. And I have a pleasure to provide you with an update from Europe on that one. So please show us the next slide. The first one is also the current experience and why is it the hot potato here? Well, you have really for 15 years now the first expansion of Wi-Fi worldwide, and everybody is looking into that one very excitedly and would like to move forward. From a technology perspective, it's really providing new experiences and new capacity to Wi-Fi, which is one of the most used technology on a private sector and also in the enterprise sectors all around the world, and provides a huge opportunities for everybody moving forward when they would like to use and get in touch with spectrum. I think everybody from us have their own Wi-Fi networks at home and also in their enterprises as well, and therefore we can really see here broader bandwidth and broader opportunities. Europe has looked into that one very carefully, and we were very excited that the Wi-Fi Alliance and all other interests and also the DSA are looking into that particular band 5925 to 6425 and higher as well, with the view that this one doesn't need any further activity at the ITU level than the recommendation level. So we do not need to have a new allocation for that one. It's already a mobile band at this point in time. And that was one of the backgrounds at WRC 19 or in the preparation for WRC 19 that we haven't thought about a new agenda item, which would be conflicting then with further decides. Europe then started with their studies regarding the feasibility with FSS and also with the FS. Germany in particular has also a lot of fixed links in the band. It's one of the intensively used, I would say, wide range or long distance fixed link bands, which is remained below 10 gigahertz. And therefore we are very careful not to really put any compromises or any bad experience to the FS side on that one. And therefore, we are very happy that we found a good solution here, which is already in line, as you heard from my colleagues from Brazil and also the UAE, with regards to the technical values. I will not dive into the details. We can speak about them later on. So next slide, please. So if you see here now from a regulatory perspective, Europe is ready for that one. And of course, the European Union are working on that as well. We have approved already the ECC decision back in 2020 and the official implementing decision, which is then binding for all of the 27 EU member states, is already in the official publication. And I expected it in the next days or at least in the coming weeks. And we would like to then make the spectrum available as soon as possible. And Germany will implement immediately the decision coming in there. And we are looking forward also to further proposals which are moving further into Wi-Fi 6E and maybe in the upper band as well. Therefore, we see that the other European countries, and I heard a lot of my colleagues as well, that they would like to do the same in Europe. So Wi-Fi 6E is really on the run here, and we are happy then to bring the equipment on the market. Next slide, please. If you look and then to the impact of WRT23, and maybe that's one of the questions we have to discuss later on a little bit further, is really, do we have some kind of coexistence between IMT and Wi-Fi in the band? Well, in region 1, as you said, Mary, we're in 6.425, 725, and plus the upper 100 megahertz on a global scale. We have then maybe some kind of conflict of interests here, or I would say a competition between the technologies. From our European perspective, we are always seeking for a technology neutral regulation, which allows then specific technologies moving forward on a broader scale. And we've seen that already at the last WRC in the, I would say, WiGig band, 66 to 71 gigahertz, where we would like to seek also the opportunities for IMT usage, but also for Wi-Fi usage. This is really providing an opportunity of a variety of possible services, and it enhance the technology options. And the question is then the sharing opportunity. Do we need to have a specific access system? Do we need to provide further sharing discussions and elements for technology or technological issues to provide sharing opportunity between the different technologies? But one is clear here as well, as I spoke with many of the players back in Germany. IMT is more for the outdoor usage, and the indoor usage is then Wi-Fi 6E. Of course, there are always other problems as well, but this already provides a huge opportunity. And if you think about that direction, it may be possible to really find a good sharing situation for both technologies in the band. And then we have to really define the sidelines, and maybe that's an issue for the later discussion. And then the next slide, please. I think that's only my thank you slide. No, that's the next one. We are almost finished now with the first step in this direction. We are working already in parallel. And if there are new ideas and also the demand for further spectrum for Wi-Fi, and I heard it already from many people who would like to have maybe a discussion in Europe also, therefore, in Europe as well, then I just need to say, well, our work at CPT and is contribution driven, like at the ITU, and if there is any interest, then please come up with a proposal and we will work further on this issue, on this exciting issue of Wi-Fi 6E. So, and with this one, I thank you very much already, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Well, thank you for that overview. That was very, very helpful to help us understand exactly where things are in Europe. And I understand the publication of the decision is quite imminent in the European Journal. Yes.
We are just waiting for it already for a couple of weeks because the decision has already been taken and it was already expected for the end of May. So I was more happy to announce it right now, but obviously there are still some administrative things going on. Maybe the translation into the I think 13 up to 18. I don't know how many different European languages we have there. It's quite a challenge always. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. We often forget how fortunate we are in the United States that we only have one official language. We have to
exactly.
So our sympathies to you. Last on our panelists, but certainly not least, is former FCC Commissioner Mike O'Reilly, who welcome, Commissioner. who was on the FCC from 2013 till toward the end of last year. And I can't underscore enough how important a role he played in the FCC's deliberation of 6 gigahertz and how he drove that decision forward. It was greatly appreciated by everybody in industry. And you have a fairly extensive background working up on Capitol Hill in advising senators and representatives on communications issues. You have since moved into the private sector with your own consulting firm, and also become a visiting fellow at the Hudson Institute and a senior fellow at the Media Institute. So you're not letting any grass grow under your feet, that's for sure. Even though you've left the agency. So the FCC was the very first decider on 6 gigahertz in the world. Congratulations again. And could you talk a little bit about the FCC's decision?
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you so much to DSA and Marta for having me. It's much appreciated. I must say, it's thunderstorms are starting here on the East Coast of the United States. So if you see any of my toddlers come running at me, I apologize for that in advance. They can be scared of the thunder. As Mary mentions, I'm no longer at the FCC. My views are clearly just my own, and I'm not advocating on any proceeding at the current time. I've been a long proponent of unlicensed services, or licensed exempt, as you may say, for decades. And you started with the TV white spaces, and some would, call it the predecessor to the airband initiative and things of that nature. And I'm so appreciative that a number of years ago, I met with industry advocates on 6 gigahertz and decided after a couple of meetings that I was going to champion this issue and be a lead advocate for allowing unlicensed to operate throughout 6 gigahertz. And it was quite a process. To be fair, we started this with a knowledge base that Wi-Fi and unlicensed services are so important in the United States. Both 2.4 and 5.9 were the mostly, or 5 gigahertz, excuse me, are mostly prominent areas. They're being very congested and very difficult to find an opportunity to use them. That we just needed to expand our usage, expand and provide wide channels. That the Wi-Fi 6E will allow the 160 megahertz, 320 megahertz that we're anticipating going forward, and even leading to Wi-Fi 7. So we're really excited about that. It came to a need. Our debate in the United States was very difficult on 2 fronts. You had one group of incumbent users in 6 gigahertz who were not interested in sharing at all. That makes the utility providers, some public safety, some wireless backhaul microwave services. And then you had a group of industry that would like to see it, that wanted to see it licensed for IMT services going forward. And while I respect that, we worked hard to find other bands such as C-band and some other things that to complement the license side of the equation. And we believe and work through the difficulty at the commission to deal with the sharing components. And we came up with basically what I'll say is and try to be as simple as possible, 3 outcomes of our decision, which is about a little over a year old, April of last year. 3 basic decisions. We'll have low power unlicensed indoors for all 1200 megahertz. 2, standard power unlicensed for 850 megahertz with the use of an automated frequency coordinator, as others have talked about. And then 3 is a further study on very low power use in the band, 3 meters distance kind of services. We're really excited about the whole Internet of Things going forward and what that can be and all the different connectivity that can possibly come from that. And then possibly, as well as that, increasing the low power unlicensed levels that I previously mentioned that we've adopted. Could we increase them to quite a bit for the indoor portion of that? And those things together, I think, can be decided by this new commission, but I defer to them and I take no views as required. And so I'm really excited about where we are in terms of the United States. It's not about who was first, it's about how it's expanding globally. And to hear my fellow compatriots, some that I've worked with in the past, and panelists that have been leading the charge in other nations and other regions, it's so exciting to see where we are for unlicensed. I've always viewed this entire debate, you know, I've always viewed this, the 6 gigahertz and what we're doing in Wi-Fi 6E was going to be a complement to licensed 5G services and eventually 6G services. And so I'm really excited where we are, and I'm sure we're going to get into some of this in the question part, so I'll save some of my time for that. And thank you again, Mary, and back to you.
Great. Well, that's a great summary of the FCC, and you sorted yourself a little bit on the important role you played, but other than that, I have no complaints. So let's start discussing this band, and all of you, whether you've picked the full band or whether you're working on the lower 500. All of you have been at the forefront of making a decision about letting license exempt or unlicensed services into the band. And of course, every time that an unlicensed service wants to get into a new band, it's not about displacing the incumbents, right? There are primary licensees who have bundles of spectrum rights that are always superior to license exempt radios. But the one common thing that always happens when you're trying to open up a new band, whether it's for unlicensed or for any purpose, is incumbents tend to get very unhappy because they've grown used to the way that things work in the band. They're comfortable with it, and now you're going to introduce a bunch of new transmitters, and there's a lot of hand-wringing and complaining and anxiety, frankly, from the incumbent community, which is natural and understandable. Okay, so my question is, in your different agencies and in your experience, wherever you are in the world, how do you address that? That sort of reaction that you get from incumbents who say, "Oh, you can't let them in. It will disrupt our operations. We can't tolerate it, and you should tell whoever it is to go find spectrum somewhere else." How do you overcome that in order to deliver more use of the band, more intensive use of the band on a shared basis? Who would like to start?
Well, maybe I can. Here in Brazil, in our experience, it was very interesting because, for example, for the broadcast sector that's widely use the 6 gigahertz band for electronics new gathering, they were very supportive to the Wi-Fi 6E because they had more concern to have in the future IMT and maybe need to move from this band. Other sectors, like, for example, the satellites, they present their issue. We not only have uplink, but we also have downlink, but basically we have 3 or 4 earth stations with a downlink in this band in Brazil. So we talk with them, they present their views in our public consultations, we reply at them. And the strong concerns was with the fixed service. However, those who represented the fixed service were basically the same that represent the IMT, because they said, "Oh, this is my backhaul, and the Wi-Fi 6E will interfere with my backhaul." And I always asked, "Okay, and what about IMT?" "Oh no, IMT we will share, and the coexistence is guaranteed." So in the end, we do believe that Wi-Fi 6E with the low power as they operate, usually indoor operation or wearables devices, or in the future standard power with automated flex coordinator, they really are good neighbors. But that's why we are very confident that we had the right decision.
Yeah, and you were fortunate in the timing of your decision because you had coexistence studies as between the license exempt technology and the licensed technologies. You had examples from the US, obviously in their decision, and then you had examples from CEPT in Europe also, which I'm sure helped. Anyone else? Alexander, how do you overcome?
Yes, well, I can speak to you on your general, providing a general answer. How is this? Maybe that Europe has an easier task. If it's brought to the attention of CEPT, you need to have 5 supporting countries for an item, and if you have already 5 interested administrations moving forward a topic, it's easier for the others to say, okay, we have to have an in-depth look. We can't ignore it. So if you really bring then forward your concerns, then you have to bring us some technical arguments, and then we bring them forward into the studies on CPT side. That's in general. Looking into Wi-Fi 6E and the 6 gigahertz band here, I think we had overall a good timing and a good timeline there, because we had the discussions on 5G, in particular in the millimeter wave situation. 26 gigahertz was the band there, and there we had a similar situation where we have fixed service, where we have the FSS, where we have a lot of Earth stations, and also the IMT community has to cannibalize their fixed service links there as well. And if you say, okay, we make available then 3 gigahertz for you in 26 gigahertz, then you can make available 500 megahertz for Wi-Fi 6E and 6. It was a complementary situation on that one, and therefore if the studies are feasible, and that brought a lot of I think good spirit into the discussions at CPT side, and therefore we were happy that the studies turned out in that particular point. However, if we look into the details, and there is always the devil, that's also clear, we had a lot of discussions with the very low power situation, in particular with ITS. Agostino mentioned that one as well, and we needed to have a very in-depth discussion. What is the right limit to really ensure the protection of urban rail in that regard? Because we do not want to interfere with public transportation, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Right. Yeah.
If you allow me,
yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Well, it was interesting things when we started about studying the 6 gigahertz or Wi-Fi to be implemented in this band. As I mentioned earlier, that we do have fixed services a lot, and we do have also fixed satellite services. And you probably know that we have here a number of satellite operators, UE satellite operator, Thuraya, Yahsat, and they are using, especially Yahsat, they are using this band totally for fixed air station or for VSAT even. It's not something easy. So when we decided to go to this band, he said that, okay, it's better to start it with 500 megahertz to see it. Although our telecom operator, interesting that they were happy to use this band also for IMT, by the way, for the IMT, not for the Wi-Fi. But we all rely on the sharing studies, how the technical visibility can protect the incumbent services, especially there are, as I mentioned, that there are some other major customer, some government, they have using this one band also for fixed services. So how we need to make sure that the feasible studies or technical condition that can protect or can lift two different services work together beside each other. So for that reason, when we put some technical condition, and of course the Wi-Fi will be indoor, if you see that our decision should be just indoor, not to be used for the outdoor, with I believe 200 millimeter wave, 200 I think dB for that one. So then we put this kind of condition, and we submit as a consultation. We'll discuss with the customer, seek their views, and then make sure that if there is any incumbent services to be protected, not to have causing interference, that make easy for us to go forward. However, for the rest of the band, still, it's not something easy, because again, it's always required to see the feasible study and technical studies has to be compatible and to make sure that this service is protecting. However, if we will go again for the rest of the band, either for IMT or for the Wi-Fi, I don't think that will be for us for the coming years to be used for the outdoor with the high power, because it is still, we have so many fixed services and need to protect it. Sometimes what we are doing, we do some our own studies. We did our own study, technical sharing between two services we have, and to see how far that these two stations can live to each other, and then later we can decide it. The studies going on between the telecom operator that we are having here right now with some vendors, and hopefully that if the study shows technically it is feasible, maybe we will decide something else. But this is the way that we are doing also here, and how we discuss with our operators and try to make sure that their services, their existing services, to be protected.
Spoken like a true engineer. Yes, look at the technical studies. Let's figure this out. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Well, I think my colleagues had similar experiences as I did when I was at the commission. You know, it was the technical studies very helpful. It's also a historical perspective. Many of us have lived through TV white spaces. I've been very engaged in CBRS at 3.5 and the three-tiered system that we created there, and the ESC and the different structures in the AFCs that we're going to use there. I think that's so important to be able to then come to such a band and recognize, what is a legitimate complaint or a legitimate concern versus incumbents who don't want to share, and who haven't been asked to share in the past. We had also had, as I mentioned earlier, we had the experience with those that wanted more licensed services, IMT, in the band, kind of working against their own interests. And so it's par for the course in the FCC to have really competing interests and have naysayers. But here, the engineers of the agency were able to come forth with the sharing studies that highlighted all the different experiences, and you see some limitations. I would have gone further. I would have liked to have gone further. I pushed as hard as I could on very low power, and we didn't come to resolution to a point that was satisfactory at the time. And so we held back that, or it's been held back, and will be addressed at a different point. I'm hopeful when I left the commission. So I think you see as a balanced outcome, and I think people respect our engineers at the commission worldwide, and that provides a fine landing spot for where we came out.
Great. Well, let me ask a slightly different question. Again, relating to the fact that each of your agencies has made the decision that some or all of the bands should be open. At some point, it goes beyond a technical study that, yes, these two systems can exist, or these three types of systems can coexist, and you have to make a judgment that it's important that they coexist. It's important to make more use of the 6 gigahertz band. So I'm just curious, what did you think was important about opening the band to license exempt or unlicensed technology? What good was going to come of that in your view, or what did you think? What was sort of the motivating reason why you or your agency came to this conclusion?
Well, I'll start this one. I'll start, and then we'll go backwards maybe. I'll be really quick and say, some of it is congestion that I talked about. Bands that are already being used, prominently, and congestion. The second is what we could see as possibility. Well, I'm not quite sure how exactly it would be used. That's the beauty of unlicensed or licensed exempt. We're able to see what possibilities existed in having wide channels and its location really close to 5 gigahertz for having 6 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz right there. And that's why we've been active on 5.9. And so people talk about economic studies and things, and what gets you to that point. And somebody who's worked so hard in this industry, works so hard to move these issues forward, it was just so easy for me to champion the issue.
Great. Agostino?
Well, I think that all technologies have a multiplicative factor in the economy. So, for example, in our home, it's common, for example, that you have your fixed broadband, something like 200 megabits per second, but your experience inside the house may be something like 30 megabits per second, 40 megabits per second. So with Wi-Fi 6, we expect that this experience will improve a lot, and this will transform and impact the economy. And also, there will be many applications that will be possible with this new technology, like virtual reality, augmented reality. So there are many options and that will be created, new applications that will be created with this new technology. So that's why we will face these impacts in society and economy, delivering all the potential of Wi-Fi 6E. So we took this into account when we had our decision.
Any other thoughts from our other panelists?
Two elements. Yeah, opportunities and innovation were one of the drivers or main drivers there as well, and also that we would like to make as spectrum available in use as much as possible. And the other aspect on that one was also that there was a lot of congestion already in 2.4 and also some technical issues and a disturbance with the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and therefore we were quite surprised that it was not coming earlier in the process. But of course it was the right point in time, and the US picked the opportunity to be the first here and push the others a little bit further. So thanks again to the FCC on that one. But from our understanding, that was also one of the drivers there that we would like to seek for other alternatives. And I think we opened here a door now for further discussions on Wi-Fi, and we heard already that Wi-Fi 7 is at the front door. So we will see a further discussion there coming up.
Yes, in fact, I think we're at the first draft of Wi-Fi 7 now. Yeah. So we actually have some things written down on a piece of paper as opposed to just ideas in people's minds.
That's how things started.
That's right. And what about in the UAE? What would you say?
As I mentioned maybe earlier, that our government, when it started here 2015, they put us as a vision for 2021, and they have put it a number of national agenda, we call it, for each sector, number of international indices that we have to achieve a target as number one in the worldwide, and number of indices or top 10, something like that. And the broadband, if you see it, that which is issued by ITU, that we are one of the highest countries in the world, especially in FTTH, that we are number one, and mobile penetration, that we are number one for the last 3 years in the UAE. So these kind of things, and then we need to provide customer needs. Our consumer, they are using highly here about for the broadband, and as my colleagues also mentioned, that we saw that 2.4 and 5.9 become congested, so that decided to go with these new technologies. In the UAE, that similar that we are doing for many countries, said neutral technology. We are trying to bring all new innovation, new technologies in the countries, and upfront also very quick. So when we saw it also, this new technology is coming, Wi-Fi 6E, we decided that very quick, why not to bring it here also to this country. And since we are the region one, we have here 4 regional groups, and we saw it, our colleagues in CPT, that they have decided to go to this one. We did the same thing. They said that why not to go this one here very quick and to bring it this technology in the UAE to fulfill the customer need for in the Wi-Fi, especially with the very high speed, the latencies, and also that 5G is very promising, but it is still not now, if you know it all, the latency is not right reaches to this as much as Wi-Fi or the speed, even the throughput speed. So one of the drive things that we made us here, first of all, the customer need, and then we have to fulfill our government direction and vision.
Great, great. Well, there's clearly a common theme of innovation running through all of your all of the motivations of these various agencies, and certainly at Cisco we share that view and say it's not just innovations and applications that will use Wi-Fi, but it reaches into the core of how our economies are going to work coming out of this pandemic, as more and more businesses become more intensively involved in wireless networking. So we fundamentally agree with that. So that's great. So I want to go back to Region 1, because I know when I talk to regulators around the world, there's a lot of confusion about what's happening in Region 1. And I'm going to start with Alexander. So could you take us to the way back in the Wayback Machine to 2017, when all of this got going in CEPT about studying the lower part of the band, and then sort of what happened 2 years later at WRC 19, and give us a sense of these sort of parallel tracks, what's happening in Europe with the regulators, what's happening at the ITU are for studies for the next WRC. Can you lay that out?
Okay, that's an interesting one if I remember correctly. But yeah, others may correct me or amend my statement on that one. So what happened was that we had at least an agenda item which was on the review of the existing coexistence values for 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and we had the discussion there. And we found out during the studies starting after back in 2016 that it is very, very difficult to find new opportunities in that regard. We had a huge discussion about additional spectrum at the upper range of the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and we had a huge discussion also on the center ground, and we saw that there is no further possibility from the technical point of view in order to share additional spectrum at 5 gigahertz. Therefore, it was really, really difficult for Europe and the European administrations in order to move forward in that direction. And therefore, there was a discussion then going on, what can we do in that regard? And it was coming up an idea from then later on that was earlier mentioned to me, I think back in 2014 or something like that, that the 6 gigahertz range may offer up an opportunity in that regard. And this has been then, and I was surprised that it was picked up so quickly then in that regard, and brought to the attention to other administrations of what we can do in the spectrum. And then we had an in-depth look. So what's the situation? And like Tariq pointed out very, very clearly, from a technical perspective, it offered up on a summary scale already a good opportunity that Wi-Fi may coexist here with the existing FS and also with the FSS and the other services there. And this good-looking opportunity was then really the surprising figure, and we worked intensively in order to bring forward this element then up front. And in particular in 2017, then a discussion started, do we need to go to WRC? Because we went through this perspective from back in 2003 for 5 gigahertz, and Wi-Fi was in the same manner like the IMT community. But from our understanding, and I said it very clearly to those who have been advocating in that direction, well, if you just needed the mobile allocation, if you ask for then global harmonization, then there are other possibilities at the ITU level as well, with the already existing recommendations, or maybe developing and developed recommendations, and we can work in that direction, but we should not go to the WRC and wait then for 23 before we can make that happen. That's something we need to keep in mind. It's always a timeline you need to mentioning there as well, and I think that was something the FCC has in mind as well. And from my understanding, that was clear that we do not need on the international regulatory scene anything else, and that was a convincing argument which gained traction, and then we created the work item very easily at the ECC level in CPT and supported by, I think, nearly every administration. And in parallel, then back in, I think mid of 18, it was coming up the idea what we can do also with 6 gigahertz for IMT. We heard the first impression from Africa who would like to move into that direction, and therefore we were looking into that one forward, but due to the intensive spectrum in the millimeter wave, we were not convinced that this is really a way forward, and we now have I think a balanced approach taken from WRC back on the IMT and Wi-Fi side. Thank you.
Great. Yes. Yeah, but I hearken back to the sort of 2018 period when we hadn't even started talking about IMT in the ban. That did not happen until things started to get closer to WRC 19, when this coexistence study item got raised as something that should be put on the agenda for the 23 conference. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that, where IMT came from and when it got introduced into the debate. So thank you very much for that summary. So Tariq, you guys in the UAE made a decision fairly early on, I think, about the band, and we've heard decided to open the lower part and continue to look at what's happening with the ITUR study and think about what to do with the upper part of the band. Since your agency made that decision, there's been a tremendous amount of activity. You mentioned Saudi Arabia. There are many major economies here in Region 2, and we have some economies now in Region 3 that are looking at, well, Korea already opened the ban, but Australia is looking at it. Japan has some studies underway. How are you, as you watch this activity unfold and you think about the future, how are you evaluating 6 gigahertz, in particular the upper part?
Thank you. Very good questions. As I mentioned before, also that we are first of all following the studies going on in ITU, and we are participating in those working parties to see how's the studies going on. And of course, as I mentioned, also we do some of our own technical sharing studies, preparing some technical conditions, and to see even if that can protect our existing services or can coexist with each other. That is what we are going on and how we are reviewing. Even the same thing that we are discussing with our either as a neighboring countries with Saudi Arabia and others, and also at ASMG level, as well that we are ASMG. We have already having two meetings this year. Yeah, 2 meetings this year for preparing WRC. Under that one, there is a working group. There's 2 working groups. One working group for agenda item, specific agenda item, to study specific agenda item. And there is another working group we established. We call it technical working group. And this is a new working group has been established in ASMG last year, which is just focusing on new technologies, any new technologies, and to see how these technologies can we bring it here in our region, either in UAE or in our region, and we develop standards if required, or to see the existing standard work together. And then later, this group decided, of course, technical, regulatory studies, everything, and then raise it to the ASMG group. And if it is agreed, then we will having as a standard to be issued for ASMG countries. UAE also, as UAE, if I can tell you that we are having especially one of the this is always what I've seen, that one of the advantage of pandemic COVID-19 happened, that we able to have similar such meetings using webinars, online meetings, and really it is help us a lot to move forward to the digital transformation for many government countries in the world. For us, it was very good benefit to have such meetings. So I'm conducting time to time bilateral meeting with different countries. I think 1 2 months ago we had with Germany with my colleague Alexander with his manager. 2 weeks ago I was having with Ofcom, and we are having another meeting with Ofcom again because there was many issues we need to see. Last week we had with Saudi Arabia, which they are having also a new consultation paper, maybe you have seen it, for different band, for different services also. And we and Saudi Arabia every time meetings, exchanging our views and our plan so that we are supporting each other. Right now we are discussing about 6 gigahertz and about also 600 megahertz. So these kind of things, it's keep us to overview for different issues going on in different countries, and letting us also to make any decision, also the good decision for using such technologies.
Great. Well, I will certainly agree with you that as bad as all these video calls are, it certainly is easier to hop on one and talk to people all over the world than it is to try to physically get to them. That can be a cumbersome process. So we've learned a little bit about how the flow of information can be improved, I think, coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. So Agostino, obviously, we heard in the Americas region lots and lots about, region 1, they're studying coexistence, and everybody in region 2, you should just hold off, don't go full band, let this play out. It's more important to figure out and get harmony around the world. So how did Anatel digest that, and why did you ultimately make the decision to go ahead with a full band?
Yes, very important question. And the answer is that we evaluated the two possibilities to start with just the first 500 megahertz or to have the full bands. And in the end, we identified that although if you consider, let's say, a short-term scenario, it won't make a very huge difference to have 500 or the whole 1200 megahertz. Once everything's new, you will have we will start new applications. So 500 megahertz would be enough for a short term. But maybe in 5 years or something like that, you will need more spectrum for Wi-Fi. So why would we have two types of equipment? And additionally, if we just have a part of the spectrum in Brazil, probably we would have equipment coming from maybe US, other countries that would operate in the whole band. So for us, the best decision was to have a clear indication what we intend as future usage of the 6 gigahertz and make spectrum available for in a long term for this new application. So with this, we believe that we have a balanced spectrum approach for Wi-Fi and IMT, because Brazil is making available the whole 26 gigahertz available for IMT. We will work to make the 40 gigahertz available, 45, 48 gigahertz. So all the bands, Brazil was the only country in WC19 to identify all millimeter wave bands for that was identified for IMT. Brazil was the only country to identify all those bands. So I think this was a balanced approach that Brazil took.
Great. Well, those are great insights. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, sort of a step back here from 6 gigahertz specifically, although 6 gigahertz is a part of this, but in each of your agencies, there is a deep concern about digital divide issues and making sure that as many people as possible can be on broadband networks that they are willing to pay for, have the ability to pay for, and are willing to pay for. It's sort of the vexing problem of our era. You know, in the United States, we keep inching closer toward that 100% goal, and it would never quite get there. But we keep trying. Everybody keeps trying. And I think the experience of the last year and a half has obviously thrown a lot of light on why it is critical to try to enable that kind of connectivity. So this digital divide issue, it has dimensions about the geographic reach of networks. It has dimensions around cost to the consumer, whether the consumer can afford what's being offered. And sort of as you look ahead, either specifically with respect to a strategy that the agency you work in or worked in is executing against, or just your own personal view, tell me how you think these spectrum technologies, to include Wi-Fi, but also generally 5G, the other leading broadband technology, how are these technologies best brought to bear on this problem of the digital divide and connecting the unconnected? Commissioner O'Reilly, I know you.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'll start.
An hour on this.
Yeah, sure, I could. Well, I would say, I think the current debate in the United States is a little bit troubling in the immediate, because most of the conversation within our current elected officials is on fiber and how to get fiber to those who don't have it today, and even if they have broadband. And I think that's a little troubling to wireless technologies, whether it be 5G or potentially 6G at some point, or even the benefits from fixed wireless, or the benefits from Wi-Fi hotspots. I think so. I think they're dismissing
new satellite, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Right. New satellite services that are coming online. Starlink is interesting, and we're not far from having an Amazon competitor and a couple others. So I'm a little disappointed on where we are, but the problem that you highlight is critical. It is both access and affordability. I would say inch up is probably, we never got there on telephone network penetration. We got to the high 90s on penetration. We never got there on cable penetration. So but we do have a population that absolutely and critically we need to expand our networks to get services to, and we need to make those services affordable. And we're working through those. I'm from the sidelines from this perspective at this point, but it's certainly focused on the government to do so. I just wish they had a broader perspective on the benefits of all the different technologies. You mentioned, satellite, but all the different wireless technologies right now are not being given equal weight for what they can do for those services, and that's troubling.
Someone else want to jump in?
If you allow me, Marid Tariq.
Yes.
Yeah. I can share with you one thing that in 2013, our government, our leader, our Vice President, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, once he said that I need within 2 years, and raised mobile leaves this famous picture of his that I need all the government services to be available in this mobile, all the government services. And even in that one, this is just share with you also. After a month of that announcement, then later he made another announcement that I will put important within 2 years to see how all those government high level supervisor or high to put all their services, and those who will fail, we will do it for them farewell party. Or fail to, yeah, this is what the decision. And when we saw it as a regulator, how it's important because it's required a lot of things in order to provide very high broadband connectivity for network, and their telecom operator, of course, they would like to see the spectrum required in order to cover all over UAE to use to use the telecom services. And then we work as a TRA also to provide all our required spectrum, regulatory site, interconnections, whatever, to support the telecom operator to work with the government. In the UAE, that all our spectrum for mobile services, if you start with 700, 800, 900, mentioned all of them, it's already been assigned almost all. 90 to 95% to our mobile operators, and still there is a demand also in order to provide different technologies. Our FTTH, it is for the fiber to home. We are #1 in the worldwide. Almost all the country that it is connected fiber to home. During the pandemic, also, that's to share with you that last year when we had this pandemic, and of course. Most of the countries in the world also, they have shut down everything similar to the UAE. However, our two things were the most important things, that is the work remotely and the education has not stopped. We didn't stop our education. All education was continued normally, of course, from the home. And that is because our network was really ready for that. And it was ready. People can use it, and Wi-Fi or using the 5G, the 4G that time because very strong also, and it was more working perfectly. I'm not saying that 100% because sometimes you get these kind of things problems, but we are solving it. For that reason, our main target in order to do this one is to determine and to give our citizen the best all connectivity platform.
Well, that is pretty impressive and pretty amazing story. And of course, I'm sure sitting at the edge of all those fiber connections is a Wi-Fi router. So, so good for you for opening up more spectrum for the next generation.
Yes, yes.
Alexander? Digital divide.
Thank you. Digital divide is the huge issue there. Yeah, I totally agree with you that backhauling and access are the elements here. I think on the access side, we've done our job. On the backhauling side, there is still something going on. Germany is working intensively also for fiber to the home and providing more fiber connectivity there, but it is also having an in-depth look on all other technologies available, may it be satellite, may it be also fixed links on that side, but also on the access technology side. What we've learned, and this is something the agency was always working on based on their on the Telecommunications Act, is clearly competition and innovation are the elements here as well. And you've seen it with our maybe criticized decision in 3.4, where we brought forward the enterprises and with their networks on 3.738 and having their own network and their possibilities, and it increased already a huge demand on that side, but also pushed forward then the mobile operators to bringing forward more innovative products on the market. So you see, if you are alone in the aquarium, it may be a little bit boring, but if there are others, then there is a lot of movement, and that's what we've learned from the past right now, and where we would like to see also maybe a more work into the direction of the digital divide. What we've learned as well from COVID there is that we have to do some further steps into digitalization. That's clear. We are not there that we have everything on our mobile phones right now. I think that's quite impressive what Tarek said right here. And I would be happy that we were working into that direction as well. However, we made some huge steps in getting used to all the platforms, and also in the educational sector, we made really good steps forward. And I think that our lives will drastically change in terms of which meeting is really necessary physically, and where we can have also virtual meetings. And that's something where I'm quite optimistic that we will see a drastic development and maybe closing the gap in the digital divide over the next 5 years.
Great. Agostinho, from Brazil's perspective.
Well, Brazil is a very huge country. It is 8.5 million square kilometer, and less than 1% of the area is urban area, and which more than 80% of the population lives in this area. So to reach with connectivity this population is relatively easy. The problem is how to connect, for example, the percentile 95%. So the cost to connect the percentile 90% is one value. From 90 to 91 is one value. From 95 to 96% is a much higher value. That's why we need different technologies. We do not have one-size-fits-all technology. We will need satellites, and not only satellites, because we need the access. And here in Brazil, we have a lot of experience of a combination of satellites with Wi-Fi. Once to have a deployment of IMTs is still very expensive, and the final solution has to be affordable, because usually the family that lives in these places are low-income families. That's why we believe that the combination of different type of access and technologies will help to close this digital divide, and that's why Brazil is very supportive to different technologies. In WC19, we support the hub solution. We support and approve the Wi-Fi 6E. We are going to approve the white space devices. So we don't know if all of these technologies will be used in Brazil, but we have a set of solutions that the market will decide which one they will use. So in Brazil, the regulation will not be a problem.
Very good. I endorse the throw any good idea at this problem approach that Brazil has taken. Certainly, that's been the experience of the FCC and other places, right, where you really try to come up with as many different ways to increase the use of broadband. So we're getting near the end of our time together. I don't have any more questions, and I did not see any questions posted from our audience yet at this point. Do you all have a couple of closing thoughts for us on 6 gigahertz and or anything else that's on your mind tonight?
Just to add one thing. Just to add one thing, if you allow me, Mary. Yes. When I mentioned about the services, I just remember think that right now in my mobile I can renew my passport. I can renew my identity card, my car also, license car or registration. All our payment right now doing using mobile. I mean, my bills, all bills, phone bills, utilities, whatever that we can now right now do it just on mobile. Do I remember that when I going to renew my passport, I have to go to the passport immigration and give it to them, till wait and go to the those shop to do prints, everything. Right now, nothing at all. They don't need you to come. Just do it on mobile, submit it, and you will receive it. So this is kind of digital dividend that we need to reach, although that how to provide these kind of services. Why we needed this kind of spectrum? We need this all kind of spectrum so that we can fulfill our government vision, their direction, how they are going. Our regulator, what we are trying to see that all the services, why we need this spectrum on it, because all the services is to be provided electronic, mobile or by any kind of mobile platform. So that requires to have very high connectivity platform. You have to have good regulations even, and need to work as a collaboration between all different entities, putting policies, regulation also to protect DNA. All these kind of things required, but we don't forget that sometimes cybersecurity is very important in order to protect these services. So this is the thing that just to share with you how we are working here also in UAE, and how that also as a TRA regulator. By the way, now we are calling TDRA. We are just last year a new mandate being given to TRA, which is digital government. So now we are telecommunication and digital government authority.
Ah,
so,
okay.
So this is just a new mandate has been given to us, and this is the thing that we are going to digital government or digital transformation, in order to make easy also in future, which is to be as enabler for digital economy. That's what we are all looking for. So just to share with you. Thank you very much.
Well, that's very interesting. I would say here in the United States, we're at least 10 steps behind you.
Thank you. I know just we are following to see
we
also
your
SEC and Europe, how they are doing. We are following them really. We are really taking your standards from FCC and HC. We are learning from each other. We're really learning from each other. Thank you.
Great. Other closing thoughts?
Well, I'll say I want to thank everyone, and it re-energizes to hear everything that's, it provides so much enthusiasm for what's happening globally on 6 gigahertz and the promotion of Wi-Fi. And I thank you for being leaders in this. I have a different seat than I did before, and it's much different. It's much interesting to see. Someday you may be outside of regulating, and you'll see how different it is and how beneficial the work that you brought forward will be. So thank you so very much for all your good work.
Yeah, also from my side, thank you very much. And one thought, we shouldn't be afraid of sharing. I think there are always good reasons for not doing that one, but I think the regulators are the ones who have to be not afraid of it, but having an in-depth look and having some facts on the paper, and then we can move forward. There are always opportunities, and if you have shared spectrum on some things, it's first in use, and it definitely is then a growing flower. So and you see it in 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and I'm quite sure that we can move forward here as well in the future. And thanks to the DSA for bringing this particular point of sharing always up towards to us.
Augustina, you get the last word.
I share the same view of my colleague, and the spectrum value comes from the possibility of use the spectrum. So that's why if it's possible to share the spectrum, it's much more interesting for the society, because different players can use it. So I think that, let's say, exclusive use of spectrum is like an old school, and we need to update our thoughts and think in spectrum sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. And
allow me? Just,
yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate, and thank to you, Mary, for moderating this session. It is very interesting session. I like it, and for your excellent questions, and appreciate for your support also. And thanks to the DSA for conducting such webinar. We really appreciate. And as my colleagues also mentioned, that we are I'm personally, myself and our team also, we are always happy to see more information from DSA or from our colleagues from different regulators. Thank you very much, Ravi.
Thank you. And I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to do this. I know some of you are very awkward times in your day. I mean, Tariq, we've watched the sun come up in the UAE as we've been talking the last hour and a half. It gets brighter and brighter. And poor Andrew's still in the dark in Germany because it's still way in the middle of the night.
It's getting brighter too.
Getting brighter. Okay. Well, I know for Commissioner O'Reilly and myself, we're late, but we're not that late. We finished the 11 o'clock news, and now the late night comedy shows are coming on. But Agostino has also been a sport to stay up extremely late where he is. So we really, really appreciate you guys coming on and doing this for us. So I am going to turn it back over to Jeffrey. And I think we have another exciting component of the DSA Summit coming up, which he's going to tell you about. And it's been a very great pleasure of mine to talk to all of you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, all the panelists. Excellent session. I'm sure the audience will agree with me that this is way better than any late night show and worth your time staying up or waking up early. And I have so much to reflect on, and I hope you are finding this panel discussion as enlightening and as encouraging as I find it. And I told you, Mary does not disappoint. And this is definitely a dynamite group of speakers. I just want to echo one thing that Commissioner O'Reilly, talked about at the very end from the private sector perspective, to thank our regulator friends that oftentimes they don't actually get enough appreciation of how hard the work that their jobs are in terms of regulating the spectrum. A very, very valuable but scarce commodity resources that is essential to the digital economy. And I'm encouraged to seeing, when our regulator colleagues share about, the struggle, the effort that they're going through in order to make spectrum more abundant, more available, and to closing the digital divide. And thanks to Mary for grounding us, at the last question about, digital divide, because all this we're doing, be it 6 gigahertz or TV white space or 5G, they are all just means to the ends, and the ends is really the connecting people and connecting things and making digital transformation possible. So with that, I really wanted to also reflect on a couple of things that came up during the discussion, and hopefully it wouldn't take up too much time and transition to our next sessions. Agostinho talked about, the regulation in Brazil being Wi-Fi 6E ready, in fact, Wi-Fi 7 ready. I believe Chairman Moraes in the morning session also mentioned about it, and I think that's really a great example of creating future-proof regulation such that the Brazilian citizens can enjoy the expanded Wi-Fi connectivity over the next 15, 20 years. I really liked Tariq that mentioned, highlighted that this is certainly not an easy decision for anyone, for any country. There's so many factors that the regulator need to take into consideration in terms of incumbent protection, in terms of coexistence study, all that. And I like, Alexander, your way of putting it. This is a spectrum barbecue with the hot potatoes being thrown around. And I believe this notion also came up in the morning session, and Chris Zemansky from Broadcom took that a hot potato and really highlight a number of things which I think is worth mentioning here quickly, that 54% of the world GDP has actually authorized either the full 1.2 gigahertz band at a 6 gigahertz band or partial of it. And out of that, 31% of the world GDP actually decided upon the full band. So we heard from the panelists on, the urgency and the benefit and the just the amount of opportunity that's lying ahead of us and the innovation, both from a technology point of view and from a regulation point of view, that it takes to make that happen. So far we have heard a lot of discussion from both Region 1 and Region 2. We haven't quite touched so much upon Region 3, and really this session, for the timing, is really designed to accommodate our colleagues from Asia Pacific region, Region 3, which is dear to me because that's where I was from, and I used to work in Asia for many years. And we're gonna dedicate the next a couple of sessions on the Asia Pacific region, and by inviting Dr. Ismail from the Ministry of ICT of Indonesia to come talk about how the Ministry of ICT, MCIT in Indonesia is using spectrum management innovation to help propel the digital transformation, digital vision in the country. And we will also have Alan from Facebook to talk about how industry is working together with countries and regulators in Asia Pacific region to make it a reality. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Ismail from Indonesia. He's the Director General of Spectrum Management and Standardization of Post and ICT at the Ministry of ICT of Indonesia. Specifically, Dr. Ismail leads the frequency spectrum management function, and he played a big role in Indonesia's fiber ring. It's called a Palapa ring, which is pivotal to the overall ICT development. And I believe Dr. Ismail, you're going to talk about how all this contribute or kind of pave the foundation for digital transformation that the country is embarking on. So with that, I want to thank you, Dr. Ismail, to speak at our summit, and pass the time on to you. Dr. Ismail, you seems to be muted. We can see you. Okay, now it's better.
Okay. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thanks for this opportunity to speak a new approach of policy and regulation, how Indonesia enabler of the digital transformations by this new policy and regulations, and then of course some issues like regarding the spectrum frequency management in Indonesia. I'm very happy to give some brief overview about this condition in Indonesia, that actually we have a new approach and to overcome our challenges to realize the digital transformation in Indonesia. Next slide, please. We're starting from the ecosystem approach that for digital transformation in Indonesia, we need to overcome all of our challenges here. There are some issues that basic issues that need to be solved as soon as possible, especially in the pandemic COVID-19 situations. First is finalize our telco infrastructure. No doubt that telco infrastructure is a prerequisite that in this situation, every citizens in Indonesia need to be connected to the broadband connectivity. So Indonesia has a very ambitious program to speed up infrastructure for all 100% of our populations. Finishing ICT infrastructure become a common problem and focused by many countries, especially in developing countries like Indonesia. The second ecosystem approach is how Indonesia can utilize of data, because our goal in digital transformation is not only establish the infrastructure, but the utilization of data. It is a very important one. We need to increase the numbers of data being generated by a digital platform can be used and utilized by all our elements, including medium, small enterprise activities, that the decision making and public policy, everything is based on the utilization of the data. The next approach is also very important, is how we promote our local and specific platform and application. That broadband infrastructure that being built is also implement the local approach. Maybe, as you know, that significant impact of our sectors is it more easy to overcome, to solve, when we use the local and specific problems approach, because there are many issues that in Indonesia need to be implemented by local applications. Let's say like Internet of Things for smart city, something. There are specific issues need to be solved in Indonesia by the local platform and applications. Of course, we need a global partnership here. We're not being built this platform application solely by Indonesian itself, but collaborative action with the global partnership also very important. The next approach is it is very basic and important, is how to develop our digital talent. Digital talent is the main issue to realize digital transformations. Shortage of digital talents has been reported in many countries, including in Indonesia. At least we need 600,000 per year to develop our digital talent, to support our digital transformation in the countries. So developing digital talent also one of a very important issues that need to be solved together with the infrastructure, data, and local applications. Let me introduce or give the explanation about our infrastructure now. Indonesia, next slide please. Indonesia already built around 350,000 kilometers of fiber optics throughout the countries. This is very important because this backbone connected for all our municipals across the countries. This is not easy because Indonesia as a archipelagic countries, we have thousands of islands that need to be covered by fiber optics. So this already being built by all our operators, and government also chip in to speed up the development of this infrastructure, this fiber optic infrastructure. We built around 12,000 funding by government this backbone to complete to connected infrastructure that being built by the operators. In the access networks, we have three types of technology already implement: fixed broadband, mobile broadband, and satellite services. For mobile broadband, Indonesia is a very big investment already being, because more than 90% of this access network now is connected via broadband or cellular networks. We already built, committed to finalize 4G network for all of our villages by 2022. But now we are already coming in commercial for 5G. The goal of this broadband infrastructure is three. One is coverage or availability. So all of the villages have to has to build the connectivities and available everywhere. And then, of course, quality, the coverage, availability, quality, and affordability. I'm not talking about the cheap tariff, but affordability is important to solve and to give the chance for all our nations or our society to connect with the affordable tariff. So there is three issues become as goals in deliver broadband throughout of Indonesia. This is two issues need to be covered. One is about funding, how combination between funding from the private sector, from the telco operators and government budget, and then the technology, how Indonesia can choose the technology is appropriate and good enough and good quality to cover the services of the broadband in Indonesia. Not talking only about the fiber optics and infrastructure, but we are talking about the Wi-Fi. Next slide, please. Utilize of the internet access for the society. We have already built 11,500 internet access direct to the villages. Some of this connectivity using the satellite. There is because of the geographic condition that cannot be covered by the terrestrial one. So we cover some of this internet access using the satellite. There are many sectors that covers by this Wi-Fi, including the public services, tourism area, public healthcare, educations, worship, public space, and many other sectors. You see that this coverage is very wide now in Indonesia to cover internet public connectivity. Mostly this connectivity is using the Universal Service Obligation Fund, additional by and add more by from national budget. There is our situation of the connectivities now in Indonesia. We understand that to speed up this infrastructure and to speed up of the digital transformations, Indonesia needs to introduce some policy and a new regulation approach. That there are 5 fundamental issues that covers by the new regulations. Next slide, please. Next slide. One is telco infrastructure strategic. Before the approach of local government is a little bit different with the telco operators. Now the central and local government provide the facilitation and convenience in building telecommunication infrastructures. This obligation to build the passive infrastructures to open access of all telco operators with the principle of cooperations. There is fundamental value in new approach of the government to build the infrastructure. For the active infrastructure owners also has to open the open access for all the telcos and broadband operators with the principle of mutually benefit cooperations. There is one approach that already implemented now in the city and the rural areas. The second one is how we increase our value of spectrum efficiency. This is very important because we understood that spectrum frequency is limited resources that very important that sharing infrastructure and sharing spectrum frequency is fundamental to speed up the development of the infrastructure, especially in mobile broadband. So all the telco operators now may cooperate with the use of radio spectrum frequency for application and new technology like 5G, and may transfer the use of the spectrum frequency. This is the fundamental, the second fundamental of the new policy and regulation. The third one is how we value the competitions. We don't want the competition. It is very hard, so the telco operators cannot build new infrastructures and not sustainable. The keyword now is sustainability of the development of the infrastructure by the operators. So government will introduce some new limits tariff once the competition is not being held, including upper limits or lower limits. It depends on the situations, and this protects between operators and consumers and the interest of the public, business, competition, and telecommunication sector. The government also can set the upper tariff and lower limit for the operation of the telecommunications. And the next issues that need to be covered in the new policy is strategic of the issues to watch the quality of service and licenses. We make sure that the quality of the infrastructure it is good enough. It will accelerate the distribution national in all of our countries. Management of the business license also enhanced here. We do some online system. We also introduce the same-day service, all of the licensing process integrated with the various other licensing throughout the ministry. Very easy and very open to get the license now in Indonesia with the transparent process. The next one in this policy and regulation is our policy in analog switch off of broadcasting. That you know that in broadcasting services now Indonesia using the analog television, but we have a deadline by the end of 2022. All of the cities, all of the countries will be moved to the digital one. So that's why we have around 112 megs of the spectrum in 700 megahertz. That is very important. We call digital dividend for speed up our broadband, especially in 5G. This bandwidth spectrum is very important to telco operators to enhance their capability to deliver the 5G services. This new approach and policy provide a significant space for the ICT industry to innovate, keeping it in competitiveness and sustainability, so that it can accelerate national digital transformations. Maybe my last slide is talking about the radio frequency spectrum that needs to cover for all layers of the band frequency, that especially for 5G. We have low band, middle band, and high band. That we do understand that all of telco operators, cellular operators need this all of this bandwidth in this band. We do understand also there are very scarce, limited resources here. So that's why spectrum frequency sharing is already introduced, can utilize together in coverage band, in capacity band, in and super data layers. We already have some farming and refarming of this spectrum frequency. Now for 5 operators, at least they have already in the middle band to start the 5G services in the city. But as soon as possible, we also will release the spectrum in 700s and then also in 3.5 megs. In Indonesia, we have issues in 3.5 gigahertz because this band spectrum also utilized for the satellite services. But now we under process to proven the technology that how to coexistence between satellites and terrestrial mobile broadband, especially for 5G. 3.5, it is very important for us to release as soon as possible after 700 megs band. We many years ago already implement the neutral technology, so cellular operators are given the freedom to take advantage of the radio frequency bands that have been determined to implement the latest cellular technology to be more efficient and competitiveness. So government give the relaxation for all operators, cellular operators, to choose this band and utilize the technology. We have in parallel now 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. But step by step in 3G, maybe as soon as possible will be finalized, and we focus on 4G and 5G coexistence. 2G in some area that is still needs for voice, especially in the very remote and rural areas. Some program for farming and refarming also very important to us, to relaxation some frequency that utilized not in the appropriate before this policy and regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my presentation. There are very important that in times of this pandemic, coverage, quality, and affordability are very essential. This could be achieved with the affirmative regulatory approach. A new approach of policy and regulation in Indonesia covers the rules of optimized spectrum frequency by enabling frequency spectrum leasing, sharing, and optimization. And rules to enable infrastructure sharing is also fundamental to enable broadband throughout the countries. We do understand that policy and regulation itself is maybe insufficient. The change of government positioning from the conservative regulator need to be approached to become an accelerator or even become as investors. Now government chip in with the billions of dollars to build some areas that not profitable areas to be built by the telco operators. By delivering this infrastructure development budget, particularly in rural areas. I think there are this situation now in Indonesia. We are optimistic to speed up our digital transformation process. Not talking only in infrastructure, but how to utilize the infrastructure, application, and data also very important to be covered, become as a integrated approach of regulation in Indonesia. That is my presentation. I'm happy to hear if any other question maybe from the floors. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. I wonder if there's any question from the floor that you could address, or if not, we can also wait for Alan's speech, and then we can have you back if you're able to stick around, and then we can have that Q&A session at the end. So currently, I don't see questions. So in the interest of time, maybe I'll just, if you allow me to move on to the next presentation, and then we will have the Q&A time after.
Okay.
Thank you again, Dr. Ismail. It's very enlightening, this
Thank
speech.
you.
So next, we have Alan Norman. Person needs very little introduction to many of you. Alan has been an industry veteran, and I remember working with him closely at the beginning of the forming of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. So thank you, Alan, for being a conspirator in that many years ago. Alan leads Facebook's connectivity policy efforts since 2016, and he's been, let me put it this way, herding cats in terms of making a lot of industry participants working together with, regulators around the world, and particularly in Asia Pacific, which I'm also lucky enough to be part of the effort in this 6 gigahertz discussion, and I'm sure in other bands and topics beyond. So with that, I'll just pass the time on to you, Alan, to just give us an introduction on what the latest in Asia Pacific on this topic. Thank you, Alan.
Wonderful, Jeffrey. Thank you very much, and thanks to Martha and the DSA for the opportunity to speak to all of you, and appreciate your indulgence in hearing what I have to say. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the value of 6 gigahertz license exempt use in Asia Pacific and the progress that the region is making, and just provide an update, at least from an industry perspective. Next slide, please. So Facebook has connectivity at the heart of our mission. We know that communities and businesses will rely on both 5G and Wi-Fi in the future for their connectivity needs. And like wireline and wireless, both are equally important in ensuring the full potential of new digital applications and services can be realized. But for this to happen, just like making more IMP spectrum is essential to the success of 5G, opening up more license-exempt spectrum is essential to enabling the growth of Wi-Fi and other license-exempt technologies. So let me talk a little bit more about some of the benefits. Next slide, please. The last time a spectrum allocation was made for Wi-Fi was over 2 decades ago of any significance. The current spectrum allocations across the 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz are congested and shared with a multitude of wireless devices and applications, Bluetooth, baby monitors, laptops, phones, smart TVs, all sorts of devices. That's both a tribute to the success of the band, but now the challenge. Opening up the 6 gigahertz band will create 1200 megahertz of additional spectrum for Wi-Fi, essentially quadrupling the amount of spectrum currently available. Okay. The band is also uniquely suited to future growth of Wi-Fi due to its propagation characteristics and its proximity to existing Wi-Fi deployments in the 5 gigahertz band. The full 6 gigahertz band offers contiguous spectrum blocks that allow us to accommodate 760 megahertz channels, which will enable high bandwidth applications such as high video streaming, low latency applications like AR, VR. And new standards that will use up to 320 megahertz channels will enable next generation immersive applications and services. This is a big deal. Next slide. Facebook has a particular interest in AR, VR. And we see a significant benefit from the high bandwidth and low latency advantages of both 5G and Wi-Fi 6E. But in particular for Wi-Fi 6E, the large number of 80 and 160 megahertz channels will enable higher throughput, lower latency, and although somewhat counterintuitively, reduce power consumption, because we'll be able to effectively accomplish our communications in less time with more efficiently, thereby saving battery life. And this will be important for all the different kinds of AR, VR devices, which will be wearables, as you see with the Oculus Quest, or different portable devices where you can interact and have remote presence. This allowing very low power license exempt use for Wi-Fi in the 6 gigahertz band will be essential to enabling this new category of interconnected devices, providing new superpowers to users. Next slide, please. I also want to point out that enabling 6 gigahertz is also good economic policy. Dividends will come from both costs saved in getting high-speed internet, both for consumers, but also industry and business. For instance, due to licensing nature, Wi-Fi is an obvious choice for companies who intend to automate their industrial monitoring and control without having to hire external services or apply for expensive spectrum licenses on their own. Economic gains will also be seen through direct and indirect revenue gains to manufacturing Wi-Fi ecosystem and internet service providers. And finally, mobile demand is also going to increase with the increasing availability of AR/VR applications and other interconnected device services. Next slide, please. A variety of studies were done in the band, regarding in the region for the 6 gigahertz band. Telecom advisory services did studies in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, and found that it will lead to billions of dollars in economic dividends over the next 4 years. Additionally, as I mentioned just a moment ago, economies who are leaders in electronics manufacturing, calling out Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, will also stand to gain from the growth of this new Wi-Fi ecosystem or growing Wi-Fi ecosystem. And finally, a separate study by Professor Rekha Jain of IIT Ahmedabad, commissioned by the Broadband India Forum, shows 137 billion in economic value for India for license exempt. So as you can see, there are significant economic benefits as well as user benefits to making the spectrum unlicensed. As described earlier today by Chris Shemansky, the Wi-Fi ecosystem is ready. These gains can be realized today. We don't have to wait to refarm the band for new technologies, new standards. It's already in place. 14 Wi-Fi or more Wi-Fi 6E devices have already been certified. Netgear, TP-Link, Linksys, and Asus have already introduced APs. Samsung has already introduced the Wi-Fi 6E smartphone. MediaTek and Intel have introduced Wi-Fi 6E platforms for personal computers. And all the projection is that there'll be over 340 million Wi-Fi 6E devices in the market this year. Let me switch, next slide, please. Let me switch a little bit and talk about some of the regulatory considerations for the band. Next slide. Thank you. So here's a complicated chart, but what it shows is that there are many, many incumbents that were in the band. This is the US example. And this was what was the starting point for figuring out, can Wi-Fi, RLANs, and other unlicensed users share in this band with these incumbent services? We go to the next slide. You can see that the primary services are really three that were most prevalent: satellite uplink, fixed services, which are point-to-point links, and broadcast. There's also passive radio astronomy and Earth exploration satellite systems in the band. There were many studies done on coexistence with RLANs in the United States, Europe, Korea, and Latin America. The conclusion unanimously, and you'll see that in terms of the decisions that were made, was that Wi-Fi can coexist in the band and relocation is not necessary. Next slide, please. Another consideration is what's happening at ITU in the Work 23 that's coming up. And in particular, there are two studies. One is for IMP coexistence in the upper 100 megahertz of the band, and that's globally. And then for region 1 only, coexistence for IMT and all these incumbents for the upper 700 megahertz are being studied. I don't know what the outcome will be. I don't know what others, if anyone knows at this point, but I know that it was very challenging to understand all the different power levels and what was possible and mobility for low power RLAN type services. I think for higher power IMT, some of the challenges might be even more significant. Time will tell. So let's look at the progress that was made by regulators so far. This is a chart, next slide please. This chart, which Martha showed earlier today, shows that there's significant countries, over 40, that are already moved forward on making the 6 gigahertz band available. It's 1.3 billion citizens, or 16% of the world's population. So significant. And if we drill in a little bit, next slide, you can see that not only have a lot of countries already made a decision, but there's a significant pipeline of countries that are already now in the process of considering what to do. And this is ranging all the way across the world. But now, if we go to the next slide, let's look at what's actually happening in the APAC region. So what you can see is that there are already active studies and consultations, and in fact, one decision across 8 countries here. So Australia ACMA has a public consultation out where they're looking at both the lower 500 and the upper 700 megahertz for all 3 use cases, which are standard, low power indoor, very low power, and standard power using a database. Hong Kong OFCA is looking at the lower 500 megahertz. Japan MIC has started a very comprehensive study process, which will last their fiscal year, which is April to March, with looking forward to coming out with a recommendation on what to do in 5925 to 7125 megahertz. India, both TSDSI and the Broadband India Forum are initiating coexistence studies and working and have engaged with DOT, TRI, and WPC on making recommendations for what should happen in the band. Korea MSIT has already made a decision for allocating the full 1200 megahertz for low power indoor and the lower 500 megahertz for very low power. They're now looking at what to do for standard power using a database, for increasing low power indoor, and for extending the range at which VOP can operate. New Zealand NBIE has just issued a consultation similar to Australia. Taiwan MOTC have published a consultation. We expect another one looking at recommending the lower part of the band, 500 megahertz. Some of us are asking them to consider the whole band. And then finally, Thailand MBTC has had focus groups and preliminary studies, and looking forward to putting out a consultation which we will expect will consider the whole range of possibilities, making the whole band license exempt, splitting it with IMT, perhaps doing nothing, or those are the primary scenarios. So what I'd like to do is briefly make the case as Facebook and as part of the unlicensed advocacy here, why open the full 1200 megahertz? But I understand that there are important considerations across the band for everybody. First is there is a Wi-Fi spectrum shortage. John Chaffee of ASIA made an excellent presentation this morning earlier at the summit with actual data showing how Wi-Fi in the 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz band is now significantly consumed in the US and will soon be in Europe, and we expect that's portents for other regions as well. The second point is because license exempt technologies like Wi-Fi can already coexist with incumbents, you can realize those economic benefits now rather than waiting to refarm and clear the band. That's significant time difference, potentially many years. The next is, and this is a lesson that came from the United States when the 2.4 gigahertz band was first made available, and no one understood, what could be done. 1200 megahertz is an amazing band and platform for innovation. We at Facebook are focused on AR/VR and see many uses. I know other companies are also looking at that. but there are many others who are looking to pursue other next generation technologies. Making this band available will open that possibility up. And then the next point is that Wi-Fi is an essential element of the overall broadband equation. You protect your investment in broadband, in fiber and 5G by making 1200 megahertz available, because what happens is, as you improve your broadband, the last hop will be Wi-Fi. Or in the case of 5G, you may not have coverage everywhere, offloading, or creating new use cases that will drive demand. It's very complementary. And so it's important to actually support all three legs of this broadband equation. And then finally, there's so much strong regulatory and industry momentum that will deliver significant economies of scale. Splitting the band will just drive higher costs and fragmentation. So you've heard one set of arguments, but I really look forward to a spirited, informative exchange as authorities across the region consider how best to move forward on 6 gigahertz. Thank you. Jeff, back to you.
Thank you, Alan. Just trying to unmute myself. Thanks for bringing us the whirlwind tour of Asia Pacific region. There's a lot going on, and as you mentioned, many countries are either actively considering or having consultation at the moment. And Martha also mentioned earlier this morning, that's part of the reason why the Alliance and many other industry alliances has been so busy responding to these consultations. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Ismail back to the camera, if you will, if you're able to, and then we can get some questions going. Okay, there's a question from Martha, actually, for Dr. Ismail. I would like to ask Dr. Ismail about the slide he presented with the total internet access locations and the importance of internet access for society in times of pandemic. Which technology is used at these locations? Are those Wi-Fi hotspots? Are you able to hear the question, Dr. Ismail? You are.
Yes, I heard. Thank you, Jeff. Actually, basically all the access in Indonesia covers by 4G networks. But in some areas, the 4G network is not qualified enough. We direct to build the connectivity using the Wi-Fi. Some of this Wi-Fi using the satellite backbone, some of this using the terrestrial microwave links. But in the end, access network for the society, for the people, is using Wi-Fi. That is of course no doubt that Wi-Fi is a very important one.
That's great to know. That's kind of the unlicensed in action in complement with the licensed technologies. On the heel of that question, if I may pose a question myself, if you recall the last session, I believe it was Alexandra who brought up this notion of that regulators should not be afraid of sharing, and I'm sure many of in the audience will agree with me that over the years we have seen spectrum sharing as a growing from a nuisance concept now to be a more mainstream practice, and many regulators are embracing it. I do recall many years ago in Indonesia there was it was a fairly common practice for many of the Wi-Fi users to actually modify, illegally the Wi-Fi devices and transmit at much higher power than what is supposed to be, and therefore create a lot of a headache for the regulator for Cominfo at that time. I don't know if that's still the case, but I believe that has left a bad taste with the regulator with regard to unlicensed technology. How do you see that dynamic being sort of the current situation in Indonesia, and how MCIT plan to deal with it and then encourage the unlicensed access through that?
Yeah, you're right, Jeffrey. We are very headache about the situation of the unlicensed band, especially in 2.4 and 5.8 gigs. so many people, especially our young generation, utilize this spectrum to build not only for access, but some of them using for the even for the backhaul. So they put the powers of this connectivity not utilized for only for the access. But in the next approach, we are in the class license. We have a balanced approach, not anymore like open like that, but we have a quite like what we call like a database registration first. So we do in still class license, but we have a dynamic database to registration first in the small areas. So this approach maybe more appropriate for the class license. We are open, but we have some registration how to utilize this spectrum. And the next one is we do also the approach in type approval process in our equipment. That is in type approval, we are more strict how to lock the modification from the equipment itself. We have approach with the vendors how they lock their so not easy to people to crack the equipment with the type approval process. So there is two approaches. One is in type approval system. The second one is in registration for the utilize of class license. I think that's a situation different.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail, and I'm glad you mentioned about the database approach, where I want to turn to Alan to see how the industry has actually evolved over the years. Growing from the database used in TV white space to database used in CBRS, the tiered spectrum sharing model, and to the AFC database used in the 6 gigahertz for the outdoor applications. Alan, do you want to maybe make some comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the question. So the industry is making a lot of progress on database because there has been a lot of learning. TV white space, I think we proved that it was possible and that you could actually make all the elements work and protect incumbents using a database. CBRS is a very innovative new business model where you have tiered users, actually sharing licensed spectrum. And then in the case of the United States, it's a very complicated protection criteria around a mobile incumbent that's protected through a sensing network. So there's a lot of different elements to put together. The goal with AFC in 6 gigahertz is to make something so simple that we can scale very widely and enable higher power. So there's a balance between optimizing the amount of available spectrum, making everything perfect versus creating something that's so simple that we can get wide adoption. So there's a lot of work with the Wi-Fi Alliance, with the CBRS, the WIN Forum in the United States, and with countries to find ways to do this simply and effectively and scale it through standards. And so there's work, let's be clear, there's work in the United States that's going on now. I expect Canada, at some point Brazil, Korea have all mentioned that they're doing this. I think Australia will as well. So this will take some time, but I expect that it will be truly a global database deployment over time as we learn how to do it in a scalable way. One of the critical things though, and I'm glad to hear Dr. Ismail, you're creating a registration database because it will be important to know what incumbent operations are out there that need to be protected. And without that information, a database won't be possible.
Yeah.
So however you set up those mechanisms and so on, that'll be something that will be essential for making more use of the spectrum, more efficient use and shared use.
So thanks, Alan, and I agree that database is just one additional tool that now, with the technology advancement now available to the regulators, so that you have ability to actually have more real-time feedback and real-time sort of adjustment and dynamic access as an example. I want to go back to Dr. Ismail with a question, and given what Dynamic Spectrum Alliance is all about, is trying to, as part of the mission, is to closing the digital divide. I know in Indonesia, one of the major unicorn companies startup is Bukalapak, which is a major e-commerce play in the country, sort of the Amazon of Indonesia, right? And Microsoft has actually had the privilege of working closely with Bukalapak in reaching out to additional merchants. And there's a unicorn that have, if I'm not mistaken, like over 100 million users, active users, and over 13 million online merchants as of today. Now, one thing I heard from Bukalapak is that they are constrained, and as much as as fast as their business expands, they are constrained by the availability of connectivity. They would not be able to go into the regions in maybe the remote areas in Indonesia where you have 17,000 islands. So connectivity seems to be a constraint factor, to Bukalapak's growth. How do you see the government, the MCIT can work with industry and with the connectivity providers to kind of unlock that, helping unicorns like Bukalapak to get over that barrier?
Yep. Thank you, Jeffrey. I think we are not talking about Bukalapak only, but we are talking about digital economy, because for our digital economy, connectivity is a must, is a prerequisite. So that's why now government involved, Jeffrey, to speed up the connectivity in remote area. This 2021 and 2022, we have 12,000 villages not connected yet by the cellulars, by the 4G, and government spending the national budget to build this infrastructure. Will be cooperate with the cellular operators. Government cannot wait the operators coming in these rural areas, because there is not viable in economic and viable in financially. So government chip in budget billions of dollars, Jeffrey, to speed up the connectivity in cellulars. But as I mentioned, not only in cellular, but also we will be launched the new satellites, very big, 150 gigahertz of capacity of satellite by 2023, that covers 150,000 nodes that will be covered by these satellites. So connectivity is a must. This is not only problems of Bukalapak, but problems of all of our e-commerce, our educations, our health and everything. So that's why I have explained that government coming more actively now, not only waiting for the telco operators, but we spend budget, we build and cooperate with them. We are not become as operators, but we build first and then cooperate with them to operate these infrastructures. So that is our approach now, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Dr. Ismail. I want to take the opportunity to also mention, as the last panel that Mary moderated mentioned a lot about technical studies, lecturing studies, but the other side of the equation is certainly the economic studies that, Alan, you actually mentioned during your presentation, and DSA, the Alliance has been working on a number of, country-specific economic studies. I believe, Martha, if I'm correct, we are also planning on doing one for Indonesia and maybe a number of other Asia-Pacific countries. Alan, do you want to share, maybe, given we have a couple of minutes left, I want to give each of you maybe a minute or two to have a closing statement or short thoughts before we close the session?
Thank you, Jeff. My one comment to everybody in the region is that I think we have an amazing opportunity in front of us right now in terms of the next generation, how we can set the roadmap for 5G, for unlicensed technologies and for broadband, and how the three can work together in terms of wireline services to really create a whole new platform for everybody in terms of connectivity and the services on top of that. And so, you know, we look forward to working with everybody to share the information, help people come to the best decision possible. Of course, we have a view, but more important is to make sure that you make an informed choice that's a wise one. So we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Dr. Ismail?
Yeah,
you may have.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Once again, I do appreciate with this session. Of course, digital connectivity is a very important and basic to unlock our country, become as a digital country, digital nations. And then we open for the utilize of technology, licensed and unlicensed technology. It is very important to us to speed up our development of connectivity. So we do agree with Alan about this. Thank you very much.
That's great. And on behalf of the Alliance and the members, I want to thank you both again for speaking at the summit. And with that, I want to close this session and then give you a quick preview of what's to come in the next 2 days. We do have day 2 and day 3 remaining in the summit, which will start tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. And you will hear more from both the industry and from regulators around the world. I believe Chairwoman Rosen Worcel will be speaking tomorrow as well. You can look forward to a very vivid discussion like you have experienced today. And with this, I don't know, Martha, do you have a closing thoughts you want to share with the audience before we close? If not, I want to thank all of you, thank our speakers, our audiences for spending time with us. I know it's very early morning in some of your regions, very late in some other regions. So all the same, thank you for spending time with us. And I hope you find this session been useful and informative to you. Have a good day, night, good evening.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Alan. Yes. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.